everyone, my name is Elise and today we are going to be making a buzzer and also an electromagnet and also maybe a battery. I hope. So, I think a lot of you are probably wondering where I even began, where I even started, and where I got my materials from, because I'm supposed to be using home materials, and, well, they don't really look like home materials, some of these objects I have mysteriously gathered. So, let's go right to the beginning. Let's go back in time to about, let's say, 2 weeks ago. I need your switch for my science project.
Fine, let me just...
What? You're gonna let me cut it up into teeny tiny pieces?
Actually, no. No. Do not do it.
I will. I'm fine. You said I can take it.
No!
Right. So the switch plan didn't work, which I was kind of banking on. So I think I'm gonna need to go somewhere else. My dad, being the very crafty person he is, has a toolbox, so that's a good sign for me. And it also means household items, because it's technically in my house. So now that I had the toolbox, what was I gonna do with the tools inside? Well, looking at the PowerPoint, I initially had my heart set on making the buzzer. However, when I did some research on actually how to make it, I realized you needed to make an electromagnet to actually make the buzzer. And you also needed a battery as well, which happened to be two of the other items that were on the list of things that you could make. And I was like, what am I doing just sitting here? I might as well make all three. So that is exactly what I decided to do. The plan for this project is obviously to make a buzzer, but I needed to figure out how I was going to make it buzz. So in doing some research, I realized that you could make something called a negative feedback loop. This means that the circuit is not complete. It tries to complete itself, but in doing so, causes itself to loop. For my project using the negative feedback approach, a battery would be connected and an electromagnet would be magnetized, which suspended above an iron surface attached to a hinge and a connecting piece of wire would attract that piece of iron towards it. This would break the circuit and cause the electromagnet to stop being magnetic. By the power of gravity, the piece of hinged iron would fall down, allowing the electromagnet to become magnetic again. This is the loop I was talking about earlier. This would also make a very fast metal clanging sound, sounding like the vibrations from a phone. The first thing I needed to do was make the electromagnet. So I grabbed the steel bolt from the toolbox and wrapped around 102 turns of copper wire. In total, that was 6 layers of the stuff. I secured it tightly with hot glue and wrapped a lot of PVC tape to help it stay in place. In retrospect, a soft iron bolt probably would have worked better, but my dad didn't have any in his toolbox. Understandably, because it wouldn't be very useful outdoors due to its inevitable rusting nature. The electromagnet works because it's entirely based on current and very magnetic in the middle, perfect for what we need it for. If the copper wire wasn't wrapped around the steel bolt, the magnetic field can move around freely. However, these coils make the magnetic field restricted to the center, making it highly magnetic in the middle. When the wire from the top is connected to the battery, it magnetizes. When not, it isn't magnetic, therefore creating the electromagnet. I tried out a couple of battery voltages to make the electromagnet work. I tried a 9-volt battery and a couple of 1.5-volt batteries, which equates to 3 volts. I assumed that the higher voltage would have made the electromagnet stronger, but I shortly threw that hypothesis out the window, when the 9-volt battery didn't even move the nail. But somehow, the 1.5-volt batteries did. The higher voltage may have been too much for the electromagnet, so that's probably why it didn't work. So I moved on to the next stage of the project, making the battery. I know that if you combine 2 different metals and an acid, you can form some kind of voltage. So going into this, I assumed that the lower the pH of the acid was, the higher voltage it would produce. I tried 4 different acids: vinegar, lemon juice, toilet cleaner, and kettle descaler. If you're wondering what kind of protection I used against the toilet cleaner, I just grabbed myself a guinea pig that happened to be my father. But I couldn't be more wrong. In fact, something as harmless as lemon juice produces more voltage than toilet cleaner. I also tried all sorts of metal combinations to go with the acids. Nickel from a 10p coin, copper from a 2p coin, and aluminium from aluminium foil. The winning combination of metals and acids was nickel, aluminium, and vinegar. I soaked several pieces of cardboard in vinegar and sandwiched them in between the nickel and aluminium. I needed about 3 of these batteries to make 1.5 volts. However, for the buzzer I was making, I needed 3 volts. But when I added more batteries on top, the increase in voltage was a lot lower than expected, so I needed about 10 of these batteries to be even close to 3 volts. The batteries were roughly 2.5 centimeters tall, so 10 of them stacked on top of each other would be about 25 centimeters, which would not be ideal for the scale of my buzzer. This wasn't the only problem they faced. They had a high internal resistance, which meant they couldn't drive out enough current. When I tried to measure them, the voltage was very unstable. 1 minute it would be 1.5 volts, and the next minute it would be only a few millivolts. So these batteries were not going to work for the buzzer. Now knowing the sad reality that I couldn't make batteries for the project, I just used regular batteries. I think some of you were hoping for something more interesting than that, but that's all I can really tell you. Now we have the electromagnet, let's move on to the buzzer. I grabbed an empty large metal tin, as well as a can lid, a small hinge from one of my small wooden boxes. Sorry, box. 2 1.5 volt batteries, and the electromagnet from before, and glued them all together to get this beautiful masterpiece. You may be able to hear it nice and clearly in the video. However, this story is not done yet. After about half an hour of doing other things, I came across the buzzer again and I wanted to test it out because it was just so cool last time. I put the wire on top of the battery and firstly, it didn't actually make any sound, and secondly, it pretty much almost burnt my hand off. Looking back on it now, because the batteries were touching the metal tin in multiple places, their electrical impulses would have flowed through the metal. It not having anywhere to go would have let out the excess energy as heat. Obviously, I needed to make a change, and so I did. The sound was pretty quiet in the first pass, so I glued a 2p coin onto the tin lid to give it more weight and hopefully improving the momentum. This made a stronger connection for the negative feedback loop. I also coated the lid and the bottom of the tin with aluminium foil to give the circuit a better contact. This also reduced the resistance across the entirety of the contact. I adjusted the batteries so they touched the metal as little as possible. As well as adjusting the wires, instead of them looping back to the same place, I made them loop back on themselves for a better connection. I also added a plastic lid underneath the tin. The plastic lid worked as an insulator which strengthened the attraction between the electromagnet and the tin lid, while also reducing the attraction of the metal tin base and the hinged tin lid. We did it, guys! We made a buzzer! Woo! Let's go! In conclusion, I will definitely say I learned something about myself, in terms of my ability in science and my ability to make electronic devices. I also picked up a hell of a lot of scientific knowledge along the way. And I think this whole process definitely enlightened me on chemical batteries, as well as my knowledge on electricity. And I will say that going into this, I wasn't a particular fan of science. And no, I won't say this process has been life-changing. And it hasn't changed my vision for the future, in terms of my career path or my A-level options. But I will say this, someone who was on the verge of moving down from her set, not having a great expansive knowledge on science, and just not particularly interested in the subject, made a buzzer. Surely, if you have your heart set on doing something, then you can do it too. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye!